The third part of our student notes for senses deals with hearing, okay, the sense of hearing. We're also going to look at the ear. There is so much to the ear that is fascinating. We oftentimes just think of the ear as this outer structure that's hanging on the side of our head, but in reality, that's just one part. That's the outer ear. There's so much more going on within our ear. When we look at hearing, what actually happens is sound waves that's moving through the air are taken into the ear. So let me go back. And they're actually going to bounce off, causing vibrations on this part called the eardrum. This eardrum is going to set off a series of motions, almost like a chain reaction, like a Rube Goldberg device that causes these bones to vibrate in a certain manner. These vibrating bones are actually going to connect with what's called this cochlea that's filled with fluid. And that fluid is going to vibrate. That vibrations moving through that fluid actually triggers things called hair cells. That's what it sounds like. There's little tiny hairs, but they're so small they're cellular inside this cochlea. And those movements actually send an impulse along the auditory nerve to our brain. Our brain interprets these patterns of nerve impulses as sound and helps us register what is being heard. Okay, let's look at this just real quick. Here's the anatomy of the ear. You want to take a moment and jot these down. Of course, you'll see it, quizzes and exams and all that kind of good stuff. Just a note, I like to use more common language here, especially with these three: the hammer, the anvil, the stirrup, as well as the eardrum. Tympanic membrane is awesome for us to know, but I like the word eardrum. Malleus, incus, and stapes are great, but hammer, anvil, and stirrup is what we usually would call them. It's what you'll hear them if you were talking to a doctor about it, ear, nose, and throat. All right, so we got the outer ear. Just looking ahead, the three main areas of the ear. You can see the outer ear is anywhere from the pinna, or the ear that we see on the side of your head, the canal, moving up to the eardrum. The middle ear is made up of that eardrum, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, and also the auditory tube down here at the bottom. We'll learn more about that in a minute. You use it more than you think. And then the inner ear is mainly made up of the cochlea, this snail-looking structure. It's all wound up, and then the auditory nerve. All right, so this is a brief overview, and I say brief because we're going to dive into each one of those here in a minute. This might help you with your chart, or at least get you going on it. Each of these are going to have a slide of its own, so I don't want to dive into it too much, but you can refer back there. So we got the outer ear. The outer ear's main job is to gather sound waves, right? And so think about it. We have this pinna, this elastic cartilage on the side of our head, and it's got a very unique shape with all these grooves and indentions. Also kind of hangs down here and up here. It's very good at gathering sound waves, right? So it can hear all the sound waves that's around us, and actually those kind of funnel their way to that pinna or the ear. Okay, from there, those sound waves move along a hollow tube called the ear canal, auditory canal, and they bounce against the eardrum. Okay, the eardrum, or this tympanic membrane. It is a thin, very thin. That's why you can rupture it so easily. Say things like a Q-tip, or sticking something down inside your ear. It can puncture that, and that messes up this whole train. Think about like a Rube Goldberg device. If one part doesn't work, the rest of it ain't going to really trigger off later. Okay, so if that eardrum is burst, then the rest of it's kind of up to its own devices. But this thin cone-shaped membrane allows these sound waves to hit, and it transmits that signal into vibration. So it moves from sound waves, boom, 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 to vibrations. Think about hitting the head of a drum. Some of y'all that's played music and stuff before. When you hit it, you can see the ripples, especially like a slow-mo drum head. You can see the ripples, these vibrations that come from that. Eardrum, same principle. The middle ear's main job is to transfer that energy from the sound waves in the air into fluid waves. Okay, so it's going to move that vibration, that sound wave that hit the eardrum, boom, 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 and it caused vibrations. It's going to convert that into something called fluid waves. It's just movement, vibrations through a fluid. Okay, and that's going to happen here in the cochlea. But that middle ear's main job is that transfer. Okay, there's 3 tiny bones. They are super tiny. Smallest bone in the human body, by the way. Stirrup right there, Stapes. You got the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. And these 3 bones link together, and there's a great video, hopefully you'll take time to watch here in a later assignment about auditory transduction. But it converts it and moves into, it changes the sound wave from a vibration, moves the vibration along these bones, and puts vibration into this fluid and turns it into a fluid wave. The auditory tube is down here. It's connected to this middle ear portion. And what it's used for is it allows us to equalize pressure on the eardrum. Here's the classic example that you and I have both experienced. You move up in elevation, right? You're going up Mount Cheehaw, or you're going up to the Smoky Mountains or something like that. You're going up. Your ears start to pop, or riding up on a roller coaster. Your ears kind of feel that pressure. So what do? You yawn, or you open your mouth. You allow this auditory tube that is connected to the nasal cavity or the upper part of the pharynx, the throat, this nasal cavity, it allows pressure to be equalized. Okay, so pressure can get built up in this inner ear, and you can feel that when you're going up in elevation. But when you open up your throat and your nasal cavity, it allows that pressure to equalize, so your ears may pop, or really that pressure is escaping out from that canal. Lots of pressure gets built up as these sound waves come in and vibrations occur. There's a lot of movement. Anytime you hear something, there's movement going on in here. And so with that movement, sometimes this area can get inflamed. It can get pressurized. And up in elevation, it changes some aspects, especially the fluid in the inner ear and the air inside this middle ear. And so just opening up the nasal canals allows that auditory tube to equalize the pressure. So then we have the bones in the middle ear. Just look at them a little closer. They transfer those compression waves from sound into pressure waves in the fluid. All right, so it's wanting to make movements inside that cochlea. They also amplify the vibrations. So it's why you might hear a little tiny whisper. Those sound waves aren't gargantuan and very loud, but the reason we can hear them, perceive them enough to make sense of it is the vibrations actually are amplified in these bones. The stapes, or the stirrup, is this last little bone. You'll see in the video later, but it taps against what's called an oval window on the cochlea. All right, so it's going to be, this is connected to the cochlea. This hammer here is connected to the back side of the eardrum. The inner ear, it converts pressure waves in the cochlea into nerve impulses. So think about the journey we've taken. Sound waves that came in, it's changed into vibrations on the eardrum. These vibration waves are moving through the bones. Now it gets, these vibrations go into the fluid inside the cochlea. Here, the pressure waves inside that fluid, they're gonna stimulate what's called hair cells inside the cochlea, this snail-shaped tube. And when those hair cells are triggered, they're moved back and forth because the fluid is washing against them or away from them because of the vibrations that's been coming through the inner middle ear into the inner ear. It stimulates those hair cells, which sends a signal through the auditory nerve to our cortex, our auditory cortex, which makes sense of what we're hearing. But the act of hearing is really those hair cells being stimulated by that pressure. So what kind of sound waves makes the vibration, moves into the fluid, and then it's triggered those hair cells? That's for our brain to figure out. Here's some imaging of these cochlear hair cells. And you can see they're very tiny cells that look just like hairs. So think about it like this. Here's an analogy. If we were under the water, under the ocean, or in a big lake, we could see waves, right? We could see waves moving this water through. We might see some seagrass that as the water wave passes through, seagrass takes in motion and moves the way of the wave. So if a wave came from this other direction, it would move the seagrass that way. That's what's happening inside our cochlea. The pressure wave that comes from the vibrations of the middle ear causes that pressure wave to move throughout the cochlea. That causes the hair cells to move in motion one way or another, or a different sensitivity. And that's what causes those hair cells to trigger off to our auditory nerve, giving us the different sound illusions. When we look at hearing, there's 3 different types of properties of sound waves that we need to know about. One is pitch. This is the frequency and the number of vibrations per second. So we can kind of see, where's that at? Pitch. So high or low pitch, number of vibrations per second. Higher frequency gives us higher sound. Loudness has to do with wave amplitude, or how high it goes up, the crest and the troughs of these waves. Okay? Higher amplitude means louder sound. Sorry for you with earbuds in. Sorry about that. The timbre is the quality. In the unique pattern. It's the unique pattern of these sound waves. So all sound waves aren't just a nice crest and trough. Instead, it may have different elements to it. Things like a violin is very smooth, and it goes up and down in a very smooth pattern. Something like a clarinet or a shrill, somebody speaking, it may not be too high quality for us because of the very sharpness in the crest and trough. So those are the 3 parts of sound waves. Then we've got our steps in hearing. This is a great little summary here at the end. The pinna, or the ear, the outer ear itself, picks up sound waves, moves them through the ear canal to the eardrum. The energy that's the energy of the sound wave is bouncing on the eardrum. It causes that eardrum to vibrate. Boom, 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 boom. This vibration goes then to the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, or the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. These will convert it from sound or vibration into pressure waves moving inside the fluid-filled cochlea. From there, the fluid, just like that seagrass moving, will move hair cells inside the cochlea. The motion of these hair cells will then cause nerve impulses, which move along the auditory nerve to our brain. Okay, and our auditory complex will then make sense of it, interprets the patterns that these hair cells are moving, all because of the different elements of the sound wave that it began. And then, of course, you'll have a little quiz on that. Hopefully, that helped you fill in your notes.